You're listening to Living Beyond Expectations, a podcast dedicated to exploring what life could be like if we believe that our greatest source of power is within us, that we have everything we need to live life more freely, more joyously, and bigger than anything we could ever imagine. I'm Henri, your host, coach, and recovering people pleaser. And today I'm joined by Jen Legaspi. She is a friend, she is a colleague, a coach supporting other women through transition, a yoga teacher, and she's an author and columnist. And through an unexpected divorce, she found herself more free, braver, and more loving and peaceful. In today's conversation, we talk about Jen's coaching business and how who she serves and how she serves is shifting and evolving as she evolves. And even though this isn't a business podcast, it's interesting because the conversation inevitably leads to talking about how we are human beings showing up in our businesses. This is a juicy conversation talking about shame, visibility, childhood wounds, and so much more. I hope you enjoy it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Living Beyond Expectations wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a returning guest and continuing to find value, I'd love it if you could give a rating or review. Today, I am joined by someone who I find very special and have recently been able to reconnect with. We both actually went through a coaching program together, and so we have a very shared history there that I think connects us on a bunch of different levels, including our educational background, how we think about coaching, how we approach coaching. Also, the program we went through, Elementum, really puts you kind of through the ringer when it comes to the experiential aspects of dealing with your shit just as much as you are learning it. And Jen is someone who I find to be so open and such a good storyteller and really someone that I admire and respect. And I'm so excited to have her here today. Jen, how's it going? Hi.
Hi. Oh my God. I'm so grateful to you. And I'm just so thrilled to be here and talking with you as always.
We dive into it sometimes. So I'm glad that this gets to be an extension of that. And one of the things we were talking about just the other day as we were kind of reorienting ourselves with what we were going to talk about here today was this idea of burning it all down. And so I'd love to dive into kind of where that sentiment came from and what kind of got us here today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a powerful phrase, burning it all down, you know? And, entrepreneurship is a journey. I've been slowly over the past year and a half, I've been really working on being seen and sort of edging my way out of my comfort zone. And it looks like a lot of different things. But for me, I recently had an opportunity to provide value for a support group on Facebook with several thousand members. And I've been going through this process of creating content, delivering content, trying to get people engaged in the content. And it's been, that is its own journey in and of itself. And recently I decided that I wanted to do market research and really find my ideal client in this haystack of thousands of people.
Yeah, the ideal avatar. Gotta love that. Yeah, that's always a fun time.
Yeah. And even that process of identifying who really is my ideal client. Like, who is it? Who is it? Is it this person? No, it's this person. You keep refining.
One of the things that I think is so important when it comes to, and this is not a business podcast by any stretch of the imagination, but one of the important things I think to note when it comes to things like being inside of someone else's container, it is really challenging if that person isn't necessarily holding the container in a way that works best for you, right? That could mean that as you as a person in the way that you're used to this, and this, that might not be present. Or maybe it's, especially, I believe it, you said it was in Facebook. In Facebook, Facebook has an algorithm that really doesn't care about serving content unless you're paying for it. And so I think that those types of things makes it really hard when you're inside of someone else's space, rather than it being a space that you are in charge of and that you get to really cultivate the energy and how you show up.
And just speaking to that part just for a moment, it's like somebody else is holding the masculine while you're trying to flow within somebody else's structure. And it can be challenging if you're not the one who's doing both, just like you said.
Yeah. And just to quickly talk about that too, just for those that might not be kind of familiar when we say the masculine and the feminine, because I know that we'll probably mention a few times throughout our conversation today. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean when you say someone else holding the masculine?
When we think of the masculine, we think of presence, steadiness, structure. And when we think of the feminine, we think of flow. And the two work together. And just like you say, when it's your container, you get to do both. You understand the container the structure that you're operating in, and you can flow within the structure.
Yeah.
When somebody else is holding that structure, it's not totally clear. Like, for example, who's in your container? What stage on their journey are they? And from what I could tell, it was, undefined. You would find people at the beginning stages, at the pre-stages, the beginning stages, in the thick of it, and then afterwards. And by the way, this is a divorce support group. So you're going to have people who are... Yeah.
That has the markings of a potential complete shit show, for sure.
Yeah. And especially when we're talking about something like transition, a major life transition, that can be such a journey for each individual person. What can be quick for one person takes a long time for somebody else. So it's really hard to say, well, it's like there's the change and then there's the transition part, the personal piece.
Yeah.
And so you could file for divorce, for example, and get divorced, like have it be official, but you could be anywhere on that. You could be still grieving by the time your divorce is official, whereas for somebody else, they might have grieved along the way and they're just eager, okay, done. And then they're free or they feel free. And then, life seems to move on for them. Yeah. So coming back around to structure, that delineation isn't clear. And so really I'm coming into the group and I'm speaking to an audience that I have no clue where they are in their journey. And I'm thinking like, what have I been doing all this time? I just want to I've been investing in myself, investing in my business, investing in experts in their field, business coaches. And I've certainly been making progress, which is worth celebrating for sure, and learning totally, and really overcoming my fear of failing, being willing to step outside my comfort zone, try something that's not working, try something else.
What's interesting about you saying, I'm learning and I'm trying things that are new and not working. And in part of what we were talking about was also that it felt very stifling to you to do it this way. Right.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I told you, because I have a marketing background, and one of the things that I know to be true, even as I try to do this marketing thing for my own business, is that we are trained to do it in the corporate way. You have to have this KPI and the hook, which we've talked at length about, the hook, the CTA, all of that crap. Right. And not to say that there isn't value in any of it, but it also is devoid of any soul. There's no soul there, right? To your point, there's no heart, there's no feminine. None of that stuff is present when you're talking about the
Yeah.
hook and making sure that you, because what is a hook? A hook is hooking someone in, getting your hooks into them so that they stick around, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily about providing value and being of service. That's about some algorithmic social
Mhm.
media best practice, whatever. And that's all devoid of heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is as I've been, posting, trying to add value on my Instagram, um, trying to connect with people who I might want to work with. And I had been, turning some attention from that to serving this Facebook group audience and a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of heart going into that. And that sort of migration of my energy didn't actually come from nowhere. I was already kind of feeling something wasn't right. Something wasn't
Mm,
right, and like feeling kind of, I couldn't flow with
mhm,
whatever I might want to say. For example, Instagram, okay, you can only have this many characters.
mhm.
Well,
Yep.
that's limiting. That's
Yeah.
an example of structure. And I'd already intuitively been feeling like, some sort of internal frustration around what I've been doing. And so I'm trying
Mhm.
to speak to women who are at a crucial, major life point, life transition, and it's a
Mm,
transformation process.
mm,
Of course, heart. And when I think about how much money that I've invested in all these experts,
mhm,
I just literally wanted to take my arm and go, fuck it. I want to
mm,
burn it all down. This is not
mm.
how I want to do it. This is not
Yeah.
feeling right for me.
Mhm.
And, I'm just in a state of devastation. Yeah.
Yeah. Even as you're talking about that part of, the woman that you're talking about is experiencing her own portal into this new whatever life existence, etc. For her, it's also you're now talking about you going through another moment of transformation yourself and what
Mm-hmm.
that really means and one of the things that we also talked about is how when you have that lack of heart, when you have the over dominant structure of the masculine, in particular in your marketing, that has no consideration for your nervous system, right? You talked
Mm-hmm.
about wanting to show up more, right? But that doesn't take into consideration that that can be really challenging. And also, showing up, what does that really mean? Right? Does that mean that it's physically my face in front of the screen and that's me showing up? Or is it my energy, my presence, my time, my message? And
Mm-hmm.
most business coaches don't take that into consideration. And I think that brings up a greater point of just this idea as a whole in our society. There's often in this cookie cutter way that we should be operating and that we should be proceeding and that we should way that we should be being. And it's not necessarily aligned with who we are, what we actually want. And so then we try to twist and contort and do the right thing. And oftentimes it leads to being really fucking frustrating.
Totally. And anytime that we listen to the shoulds, we're giving our power away to that.
Yep.
And you know, part of this all is also this like realization for me that like still, like here's this thing I'm creating and I'm building and I've done a lot of work and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still giving my power away.
Hmm.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
And it's also a growth edge, a growth point, you know? We
Yeah.
get to, our business is a reflection of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we have in life is a reflection of who we are. It's just another
Mm-hmm.
way to see yourself in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, how do I want to show up for this business? I want to show up with it with heart. show up for it with heart and with love,
Mm.
which is actually one teaching that I got from one of the containers I was in last year. And I
Mm.
don't think it really resonated with me until the other day, what that
Yeah.
really, really means.
And sometimes it doesn't. I've totally been there where I've heard something and all of a sudden I'm on a subway or I'm waiting for a subway, and for some reason those words will echo in the back of my mind, and suddenly it's like, oh shit. That's what they
Yeah.
were talking about. Oh
Yeah.
wow. Like, oh, now I
Yeah.
get it. Right? It can
Yeah.
hit you at any moment. And sometimes it
Yeah.
just takes to have a conversation with someone that is maybe tapping into that energy and kind of connecting dots for you, even though they're not, they have no idea that you had that thing last year or whenever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's even true with our clients. You know, we can work with clients, and we can, you know, we can model things for them. We can
Mm-hmm.
teach them things, and we can say things. We can share stories. But until you're actually ready to see the thing, you won't see the thing until it's
Yeah.
time for you to see the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one of the other things I think that you kind of brought up, which I, called it the original shame, and I think you were
Mm.
calling it the OG
The
shame.
OG shame.
The
Whew. Yeah.
OG shame. So talk to me a bit about kind of some of the other things that came up in this. And the reason why I want to talk a little bit about this is it's, this is about business, and yet we show up to our business. So how is it not also personal?
That's right.
So, yeah. Talk to
That's
me
right.
about the OG shame.
The OG shame. And this is the beauty, right, of like how dots can be connected for us in unexpected ways.
Mm.
So I was scrolling through Instagram, and somebody put up a post, and it was about the nervous system and specifically about shame. And the way she was talking about it, you know, when somebody's in a state of shame, right, they are dysregulated in the nervous system,
They're
likely in a
contracted.
state of freeze, contracting, holding, right, staying small. And when you're in that state, it's hard to find the words sometimes to express.
Mm-hmm.
And people were leaving comments. I forget the question she asked at the end of her post. And I thought about it, and there's this childhood experience that keeps coming up for me in terms of like, I keep trying to sort of, I like to look at it from different angles, and it finally made sense, which is, I often say I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? So where does that come from, right?
Yeah.
And it can come from many sources, but for me, I was punished when I was a child for not behaving the way that the oldest daughter, the good girl, the straight A student was expected to behave with her siblings. And I would get sent to my room. Go to your room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first shame. The second shame for me was coming out afterwards and trying to connect with my parents and being, crying, terrified, because we already know that children, the world is all about them, and anything that happens in their world, that, it's their fault. It's my fault.
Yeah.
And so I'm already now building a story that, if I'm not behaving in a certain way, I'm going to lose love and connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am coming out of my room in tears. And then my parents would say, why are you crying? We can't talk to you when you're crying.
Yeah.
And then that was the second shame. So I was shamed twice in the way that they parented me. And certainly, they may not have known that was going to have that kind of impact. My parents were definitely in their shit and, not evolved or, they were young parents and the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. But yeah, it's the adult in me now knowing and looking and saying, okay, with all my knowledge and all my healing, whatever, but I can see that. But the child part of me, the young girl, didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean by the OG shame is the part of me that I learned to cry because that's how I could try and get attention
Mm-hmm.
and for something that I couldn't even express. Like I literally in those moments was not able to find the words to talk. All I could do was cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ashamed for crying. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting with our parents. And I think more and more people are coming around to realizing this, but I'll be one of the people in the choir. And this is not to excuse, this is not to say it was okay, because
Mm-hmm.
none of it was okay. And our parents were in their own shit too, as you
Yeah.
said. And they're dealing with their stuff, which is inherited from their parents, and their
Mm-hmm.
parents are dealing with the stuff that they inherited, right? And it just keeps going back and so on and so forth. And it's just all of this unhealed stuff that just keeps shifting from one generation to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not to say that them saying we can't talk to you when you're crying is okay, because it's absolutely not. And there's like this weird fucked up thing, especially as you get into the work that we're in, where it's like, oh, but I also hold this compassion for them because I understand them. I see them as human beings, right? We think
Mm-hmm.
parent, and parent means da 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 da. You're only supposed to do this. And frankly, I don't even know where we got that idea. Like, is that some idyllic, like 1920s, 1930s parenting thing that your parents are supposed to be these perfect little homemakers? And yeah, they're not, because they're just human beings raising other human beings to hopefully survive in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about, okay, that sort of kind of critical parenting or harsh, punishment oriented parenting. And I take a look at my father, for instance. And once, after he passed, I was writing my book, I started to dig into like, what was his relationship like with his parents and
Mm-hmm.
then his grandparents, right? And and I see that my dad was all in his pain all the time and his shame.
Mm-hmm.
He had a a father who didn't think he was really going to amount to much,
Mm-hmm.
and was that kind of critical, harsh parenting style. So he learned from
Yeah.
his dad, and then now he passed it to me.
Yeah.
And it really isn't something that I should be carrying. There's my should, but it doesn't belong to me. It never
Yeah.
did.
I
And
like to
that's why
say
it's
that
so
it's,
important for people to do their work, right?
mm-hmm.
To really
Yeah.
discern what belongs to me, what belongs to someone else.
Whose water am I carrying today?
Mm-hmm.
That just,
Who's in my
you know,
backpack?
yeah. Who's in my backpack?
Who's in my backpack?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for you, kind of bringing it back to this burn it all down, this original shame, how do those things kind of intermingle with one another?
Hmm. For me, there's this commonality around voice and authenticity and expression.
Hmm.
Um, you know, feeling like, trying to find the words here, trying to find the words, um, not being seen
Hmm.
for who I was instead of what I did,
Hmm.
not feeling confident in being able to speak up. And that thread still showing up for me in terms of what I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I thought, gosh, I really want to talk about this. And I'm like, well, I'm scared.
Mm.
I'm scared to speak into certain topics. Like, I know my truth,
Mm-hmm.
but being terrified to speak my truth, not wanting to be sued or not wanting to, you know, and that would just be another form of parental punishment. You spoke up,
Yeah.
we're gonna, you know,
Yeah.
um,
You dared
and
to express your feelings. You were sad, or you needed to, you were crying was your way to connect, and you were ashamed, and you were totally completely shut down. We can't talk to you when you're like this. Right. And
mhm.
so as little kids, we might not have the beautiful words that we've been able to articulate now. I think when we get to where we are in our coaching education, we start to be able to really sink in and dial into the perfect way to, sometimes almost give this flowery lens of language on our shit. And at the end of the day, it smells just as bad as anybody else's. And so for you, you're being constantly shut down. And so
Yeah,
then when it comes to expressing yourself authentically, you then also add the layer of these people that are saying, okay, you can express yourself, but only if it's in this way, only if you have the hook, only if you have this
hmm,
ETA, only if you put all all these steps in place. That's the only way you're allowed to express yourself. So it really feeds right into that exact moment or the collection of moments with your parents saying, we can't do this because of this, right? It's conditional.
yeah, yeah, and even approaching even though I say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and yes, I'm breaking down the walls of that. That still there are threads of it that want to show up in my business because it's about perception, and is someone gonna in cancel culture or whatever it's not gonna connect with me. It comes back to that primal need for belonging and wanting
Yeah.
to be seen.
Hmm.
And with perfection, what's really interesting is people will look at that and they see what's on the outside and they're like, oh, well, you're put together, oh, you know exactly how to express yourself, oh, you're a great storyteller. But they don't understand that underneath that, inside, is internal turmoil. The inner turmoil that goes on, there's a cycle of anxiety and shame,
Mm-hmm. I sometimes
that
like
goes
to
on.
refer that I like to refer to that as when people make comments about that type of thing, or wow, your follow through is so great, is a comment that I often get. And what I then respond to my other friends, where I'm like, that really frustrated me, is it's almost like, not quite this, but it's almost like it dehumanizes me because it says I'm this thing and you don't know the cost to that. What do you think that it requires of me? Going back to what I said about being the follow through guy, what do you think that requires? I have to constantly be paying attention to everything and making sure
Yeah,
that I don't drop any of the dozens of plates. And so for
yeah,
you as a perfectionist, oh, you have all your shit together. Wow, you're so good at all of that. There's a cost for you. And as you
yeah.
say, there's this internal turmoil. They have no idea what it requires for you to look put together on the outside.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and so many fronts, between like in my younger days, it was like how much money I spent on the way I looked, my much younger days. And in today's world, right? It's more of the, you know, you're constantly like, you want to push the edge, you want to step out of the comfort zone, and the anxiety that goes on inside, the fear. And for me personally, my cost was insomnia. I struggled with insomnia
Mm,
for so long,
mm-hmm.
just waking up at 3 a.m, being terrified, like, did I say the wrong
Mm,
thing? Did I do the wrong thing? This
yeah,
fear of being punished
yeah.
for just being
And
who I am and saying what I needed to say,
and the
you
rub of
know?
it is that person that said, you look so put together. The person, in that conversation you were having or that exchange or that post you did or whatever, they're not seeing any of that. They are seeing put together, Jen. You have all the answers. You have all the perfect words. You're saying everything. They have no idea, right? And this isn't talking more about the cost. It's like we are projecting our own stuff then back onto them.
Yep.
Right. Because we're assuming that they saw all the flaws or they, that somehow maybe they know that we woke up at 3 a.m. thinking about this thing when they never gave it a second glance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's devastating, really, especially when you're trying to create, and that anxiety can be so crippling. It'll keep you from creating. Yeah.
There's some of the work that I do is generative trance, and in that they call it neuromuscular lock. And what that really just means is that there's a constriction that happens. And when you're in that place of constriction, and I think you might have mentioned earlier the freeze state, right? When you're kind of frozen, which means you're just overwhelmed, and instead of running, you're not running from the thing, you're not kind of acquiescing and just being like, let's get it over with. You're actually just frozen. You're so it's almost like being immobile. You're just like, oh, deer in the headlights. And from that place, you cannot create because your body then goes into survival mode, right? I always love that video, even though it's obviously very intense, but like the video of the gazelle being dragged around, like, the video, this gazelle is being... I'll include it with the show notes for those who are curious, but it's fascinating because this gazelle gets caught by, I think it's a tiger, maybe it's a lion, gets dragged over to this little area, and to everybody on the camera, it looks like the gazelle has just dropped dead. And even to whether it's a lion or a tiger, they think so too, because the cat, the large cat of some kind of
with antlers,
lets its guard down. And the minute it did that, that gazelle bolted away, got away. Right. And that's kind of what happens when you freeze. Like you just kind of play dead in order for the thing to pass. And you cannot create from that place.
You can't. And the other thing to mention about freeze is there is that like the whole, everything like you're holding your breath, everything constricts, get really, but at the same time, you have anxiety. You want to be acting. You want to be speaking. You want to take action, and you can't.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And it's biologically appropriate, right? It's like, well, that's how your nervous system is trying to keep you safe. But being in that state of, and you just can't. Your feet are planted.
Yeah. And so if you can't be perfect, then you enter in this freeze state. And then you're being told that you still have to go out there and post 5 days a week on Instagram in order to keep your algorithm happy and in order for you to be seen and noticed. And at the end of the day, it almost kind of sounds like what you might be experiencing. Of course, correct me, but being seen seems to actually be the secondary point at this stage. It almost feels like it's not about being seen. It's you're tapping into this core wounding, for lack of a better term, that prevents you from being able to just create.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. 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 Everything feels oppressive. The formatting, or I don't think formatting is the right thing, but like your hook,
the structure
lead
of
in
your
sentence,
post.
the structure, it feels oppressive. And I feel like, it's like a prison, it's the idea of burning it all down includes this idea of feeling caged and just wanting to, continue to like bust those walls down.
Yeah.
And
so what would burning it down look like? Right. So just to kind of recap for everybody, burning it down is in reference to kind of how you're operating your business and how you're talking and how you're showing up in that place of the structured masculine versus the more creative flow of the feminine. And so if we're, figuring out a new a new way to talk to and to connect with our audience, what does that mean to burn it all down? What does it look like?
Being unapologetically sovereign in your choice to do it the way you want to do it.
Preach.
I mean, and yet so this is an example of freeze in this context that we're talking about. It's like, the action I'm wanting to I want to take action. I want to burn it down. And yet the fear, the fear,
And even as you said earlier, you've also invested so much time, money, energy into where you are today that I can imagine that burning it down also kind of means, did I waste all of that?
Yeah.
Was all of that for nothing?
Yeah. I definitely had that experience yesterday when we were talking of should I just give it up and just another check the box? I tried it, and then I think about the alternative, and the alternative doesn't feel very good, doesn't feel very heart-centered, doesn't speak to my calling, speak to who I want to be in the world and who I want to serve and how I can serve.
As you said, it feels oppressive.
Feels oppressive. Yeah. And there's another piece here too, which is, women also carry genetically the trauma from ancient history, being burned at the stake, killed for being perceived as witches, a threat to society, for bringing an alternate view to the table. And I remember very clearly this moment when I was writing my book. I struggled so hard, with the fear of speaking my truth, the fear of any kind of legal ramifications, and how many times I edited my voice down. And as I got to the end, close to it, not quite there, but I remember this one day, it was still so visceral for me. I was in the backyard and just this feeling of sheer terror just was running through my body. Sheer terror, like I've never experienced before. I was doubled over in pain. And I called a woman, a spiritual coach I had worked with, shamanic. And I said to her, I think this is old. I don't understand. And so she gave me some medicine that I needed so deeply to move that through, to allow my voice to be heard, and just to keep moving forward. Because we all carry medicine of some kind. All of us do. All of us have a story that deserves to be heard. And that story is medicine for someone,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the key messages that I'm taking away from this conversation is really about building that relationship with your body and understanding its cues and understanding what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and knowing that you have choice, right? And that, yes, of course, if the only way to do it is with a hook and the CTA, and I know we've said those words 1,000 times, but if the only way to do it is to have those things, let's at least get really comfortable with our message and our body and expressing ourselves. And maybe later we can worry about that. Or maybe we just do it our own way anyways. It feels good in our body. We don't feel triggered. We don't feel freezing. We don't wake up at 3 a.m. to freak out because, oh, did we say the wrong thing? And we just do it. And we do what feels right. And we do that, we listen to the nudge in the moment and we share something. And what if in the end, it didn't matter? You didn't need a hook because your audience still found you. The people that needed your medicine still discovered that you exist on this planet, that you can serve me the medicine that my soul, that my body needs. And you did it your own damn way.
There's a yes and a no in our body, a natural yes and no. And learning what your yes and your no is. Are you leaning in? Does it make you feel open, spacious, and excited, creative? Or do you feel contracted, closed off, shut down? Does something excite you, or does something really, really shut you down, And I'm reflecting back, and I'm like looking out into the jungle here, and I'm like, I think now just how many times I've had that nudge, and how many times I kept saying, well, the structure, I don't know how that's going to be of value, how I would, help translate that for somebody. So maybe I'll just keep that for myself for now. And I think that for myself personally, it's now going to start to be more paying attention to those nudges and noticing, does it make me feel open or does it make me feel closed? And if it makes me feel open, then that's a yes. That's my yes. And just to go out there and just put it out in the world.
And I think for a lot of the audience, it's really about paying attention and figuring out where your yes is, right?
Yeah.
And where your no is.
Oh, totally. So, it's the foundation for everything.
Yeah. If it's not vibrating, it's migrating is a thing that I said a few weeks back that I thought was hilarious. And so
I love it. I might have to steal that one.
Yeah, if it's not vibrating, it's migrating. And on that, thanks so much, Jen, for joining me here today on one of my very first episodes for this show. And I'm sure you'll be back. So thanks again.
Oh, I love that. Congratulations. This is awesome. This is a beautiful conversation. Yeah, the world needs your medicine.
I appreciate that. I received that. Thank you. Thank you for tuning into today's conversation with Jen Legaspi. If you're curious to learn more about her work, you can visit her website at jenlegaspi.com or find her on Instagram at jenlegaspi.coach, which I'll also drop in the show notes. Stay tuned for next week's episode where we start dropping solo episodes on Mondays with yours truly for a little dose of what I'm calling my Monday musings. Otherwise, let me know what landed for you in this episode. I'd love to connect with who's listening. Until next time.